Welcome to the Sportscast. Today's date, January 25th, 2021. If you haven't, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Periscope, and on iTunes. And please leave us a review, and it'll help us out tremendously. Visit us also on sportscast.net, and also follow us on Twitter at the Sportscast. That's also our Instagram handle. Today, I have back with me from West Coast College Football, Kent Doble. I had him on. We were trying to figure it out offline. It was either the first week, second week, prior to the season of Pac-12. It was obviously a tiny season, so who knows? It could have been it was like a couple months ago. The season went so fast. It was a blur. It was expedient and merciful to some, merciless to others. So we're just here to chat. How are you doing tonight, Ken?
Hey, doing good, and glad to be back on talking with you.
Yeah, man. So I guess just a kind of very general question I want to ask you about the season is, what did you think? What did you think about this wonky COVID season in the Pac-12?
It was a really interesting season. I think that with the Pac-12 playing a lot less games than other conferences, you can't take away as much. The sample size is just so small. I think we even left this season not even knowing who the best team in the conference was, which is, a very weird thing to have happen. I don't know if that's ever happened before. So it's not a whole lot to take from it, but I think some players got some good, time to get on the field for coaches to kind of evaluate them. It kind of didn't feel like a real season, to be honest. It was kind of my impression, or what it felt to me. But, I'm still glad that we had some football to watch and, looking forward to a real season next year.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's one of the better explanations, because I've heard some people online, in Twitter world, you can get lost in translation big time. But even, sports media people say, well, this team was really the best. I thought this team was the best, but I think you explained it best. I don't think you know who the best was. A couple teams played 7 games. Several others played 6 or 5. And then there was like 3 or 4 teams that only played 4 games. The Washington Huskies only played 4 games at home. So I walked away being like, I don't know. There was no real – I didn't think – when champion, okay, so I like Oregon, but were they the champ? No, they didn't win their division, but I guess – they did win it because they couldn't play Washington because Washington had COVID, and then they backed in, and then they beat USC. It was just such a strange season, and I completely agree with your take. I do not believe there was any way to really say this team was definitively the best. Yeah, Arizona's the worst. I think we can agree on that one. I think we can agree that Arizona was not very good. But other than that, yeah, Arizona State looked pretty good, but they only played 4 games. Washington didn't look bad. They only played 4 games. It was just so hard. I completely agree. It was so difficult to understand. So since we got that out of the way, what did you take? What from the small sample size that you saw? What did you take? What surprised you? What kind of went like you expected? What pluses, what minuses did you take from the season?
It's some takeaways I had. I think that without such a short season, there was really no tune-up in terms of getting to play some, non-conference teams. In a normal season, you get to play like the Idaho States of the world and kind of get a tune-up for your program going into conference play. And without that this year, I think that kind of led to what we saw from Arizona State and Utah in particular, and even Stanford a little bit, where they didn't look great in their initial games. I think they actually all 3 might have started 0-2, and then they all 3 won out after that point. So with a small sample size, those were some hot teams at the end of the year, and who knows what would have happened in a full season if, they played the full 9 conference games and the 3 non-conference, and, where they could have been at and how the races really would have, shook out. And Stanford in particular, they didn't even have Davis Mills when they played Oregon, and he was a little rusty against Colorado in that second game, and then he kind of came on at the end. So, I think that, again, the takeaway is, like, I don't think we knew really who was the best teams, but I think we can kind of project somewhat into next year. I think that's what it really helps with is, like Utah and Arizona State, I think, are actually really primed for good seasons next year from what we saw this year at the end of the year. Stanford, I think they lost too much to really be a factor next year, which is actually too bad for them because they actually look like they could have been a contender this year if they had more games to play. And then, Oregon and UW, I think, are they have good, really talented rosters that are coming back next year. So, I think we know they're contenders. And then I think USC blew their shot. I mean, this was their chance to win the Pac-12, and I don't think they're going to do it next year. They'll be solid next year, but I think it's going to be back to UW and Oregon again, and maybe even ASU or Utah representing the South.
Man, Kent, you're just like reading my. If you heard the podcast last week, you're just offering the same sentiments as me. I mean, yeah, I completely agree with you. Because right now, when you see the way too early rankings, you've seen, pretty much every major sports network, 247, Athletic, ESPN, have been putting them out. And I've seen a lot, especially like ESPN 247 in particular, they have USC first. And there was even an article today that said USC, they could see being a dark horse playoff team. And I'm like, I don't see it. They lost two of their best wide receivers. They lost by far the best offensive lineman in Elijah Vera Tucker. They lost their best defensive lineman in Marlon Tuilapalupe. They lost their best safety and the best defensive player in the Pac-12 in Talanoa Hufanga. They lost their best cover guy in Elijah Griffin. They have some talented guys coming back, but most of their most talented guys will be actually true freshmen. And one thing that I learned as a fan of a team like Oregon this year, when I kind of probably thought they were going to be better than they were, I didn't take into account that 79% of their scholarship athletes were underclassmen. So anytime you see where your best players, your highest rated guys, the guys with the most talent and potential are being underclassmen, that's never really something to put your foot on for having a successful season, at least initially. So, I completely agree. I noticed the more West Coast centric guys like a John Wilner or a Stuart Mandel for the Athletic, they kind of offered the same sentiment. Actually, Mandel didn't even rate USC. And because he knows he's the West Coast dude, so he knows exactly what's on the roster and kind of what they lost, and that USC probably will not be as good. I would totally agree. I think Arizona State and Utah, I really think they're bringing back quite a bit, both those teams. Unfortunately, in just a tragedy, Utah lost one of the best offensive players in the conference. He actually lost his life.
Hey, you're still there. I think I lost you.
Oh, can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. Kent, are you there? Hello? Well, Kent might. Let's see. I think we lost Kent, actually. Hopefully he can get back on here and we'll join. Anyways, so until he's there, that was a good conversation. Hopefully he can come back. I was agreeing with a lot of his takes on the Pac-12. In particular, the fact that USC is probably going to have a little bit of a drop off. You're going to see Utah. He's back, I believe. Ken, are you there? Hey, Ken, are you there?
Yep. Hey, I think the call dropped or something. I was like, I couldn't hear you talking anymore.
Okay, sorry, man. I don't know where we were. I don't know where I was at exactly, but I was basically. I don't know if you heard. I agree with you on USC. I don't know if you heard me say that.
I did hear that. Yeah, I heard the part about with Stuart Mandels and
okay,
didn't have USC ranked.
I think most of the West Coast people realize more so than the national people, and that's actually something I've realized recently. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but man, the Pac-12 is kind of forgotten. for most of the especially a lot of the national media, especially anywhere in the South and stuff, man, they're some of their takes when it comes to the Pac-12 in general and the rosters and the predictions, it doesn't seem like they have a very good working knowledge of the conference. But anyways, back to the subject line. Let's not diss anyone else. I agree. I think USC is someone that probably will go in a little higher rated than they should be. If I were to predict right now, I think they're a 7-5 sort of team. And I think that possibly would be the end of Clay Helton. He's perennial in the hot seat. So I think it'd be tough for him to get another year if he finished that. And I do really see them heading that direction just because they have too much youth. All their better players are going to be really young. And they just lost a lot of really good, productive players. I agree. I think Utah and Arizona State are definitely going to be teams to reckon with. Unfortunately, Utah, of course, in the most tragic of ways, lost the life of Ty Jordan, who was amazing his freshman year. He was one of the best players in the Pac-12 as a true freshman. So they have to replace him. They also have to replace the quarterback, Bentley. He wasn't very consistent, but they're going to have to replace him with probably either Jadarius Jackson or Charlie Brewer. And then Arizona State obviously brings back Jaden Daniels. They bring back quite some pretty explosive guys on the offensive side of the ball and a pretty solid defense too. So I agree with you on the South. And then UW and Oregon in the North. I agree. Now let's talk a little bit about UW and specifically Oregon. So in the North, we can agree that they're both going to be the favorites. My one question about UW, I only saw them play 4 games. I still go into next season a little bit skeptical of that offense. In the 4 games that I saw, I didn't see a lot of explosiveness, particularly out of the wide receiver position. I also didn't see the ability of a guy like Dylan Morris to get the ball down the field. And they have a terrific offensive line. They have a solid running back, but they don't really have a game breaker type running back. And I still have question marks of John Donovan in general as a play caller. What was your overall thoughts of Washington on the offensive side of the ball?
I agree with you completely. I think that I was pretty skeptical towards the John Donovan hire. It didn't inspire a ton of confidence, based on his track record and where he was currently at in his career. But again, too, trying to have a run-first offense, it's not necessarily the best idea when you don't have a true running back that can really perform at that level. I thought that Richard Newton could have been that guy, but they didn't really play him this year, and it's kind of a mystery to why. It seemed like he kind of got into the doghouse of the coaches. So, going into the season, I think he was their top option, but didn't really play. Sean McGrew, I think he's talented, but he's not your every down running back. He can take like 10 to 15 carries a game. And then Kamari Pleasant, I'm not a huge fan of. I didn't think that he really showed enough to warrant the carries he got. How much they ran the ball, I just didn't really feel like they had the running backs to really take advantage of that. They do have an elite offensive line, and that's all coming back next year. Dylan Morris was, solid enough. He didn't really strike me as like a game breaker yet, but he was also a freshman, so it's hard to really judge that. The wide receivers, I think that Huskies actually recruited well at that position the past few years, but they haven't really shown much on the field. So, my takeaway is the same as yours. I don't think the offense was all that great. The defense side of the ball is a different story. I think that the defense next year will probably be the best in the conference. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Defensively, I think while Jimmy Lake is there, I know that I can't spell his last name is Kozakowski. How do you say his last name? Kukowski. There you go. And he obviously left to take the Texas DC job. And a lot of people are like, you see online, once again, you can't listen to fans in the echo chamber, but Washington's going downhill. I'm like, it's Jimmy Lake's defense. Jimmy Lake's a defensive coach. He still has all those amazing defensive backs over there. So yeah, I don't really see that much of a drop off in the foreseeable future defensively. It really does where Washington's ceiling is probably I question its ceiling. It really is offense. And you see how that college football is turning. You have to be able, in particular, to make explosive plays down the field. And just the limited ability, and then Puka Nacua, who I thought has been the most talented wide receiver, I don't know if he's coming back to Washington. So I know a few people, and as of right now, I don't believe he is going to. Now, he hasn't officially left, so that's still up in the air. But as far as I know, he's probably not going to. So if you lose Nakua, then you're going to have to rely on guys like Jalen McMillan. You're going to have to watch Roman Adaziano. Ty Jones also left. Terrell Bynum, I believe, comes back, if I'm not mistaken. And then you do have, I think, the best tight end in Cade Otton in the conference, and obviously he was very good. But I just think there has to be some way for that offense to be more explosive. Otherwise, you're just going to end up losing some games that, I mean, your defense, no matter how good they are, they're going to give up. I mean, it's hard to stop other talented teams. Oregon is going to be returning a lot of offense, and it's bringing in one of the most talented offensive recruiting classes in the entire country. So Oregon with a great offensive coordinator, they're going to put up points. So Washington is going to have to go to head with them. And I think right now, they just not showing enough on offense. But like you said, to focus on their defense, ZTF was one of the best edge guys on the Pac-12. But I mean, his 3-game stretch there, he was pretty remarkable. I'm terrible at names. Ufacino, is it the linebacker?
Ulofoshio.
There you go. You have to crack me on the horrible names. He was terrific. I mean, one of the highest graded, I think, linebacker in the conference, one of the highest in the nation by Pro Football Focus. Ryan Bowman, I think he was out a couple games, but he's a very good player. He came back. That was kind of a surprise to me. Trent McDuffie, maybe the best cover corner in the Pac-12. There's definitely an argument for that. Kyler Gordon, he's definitely a physical freak, and he got better. I like your defense, and I think your defense is going to continue to be pretty good. I'm saying your defense. You're from Washington, but it's not necessarily your defense. But I like some things that Washington has on defense. My question is on the offensive side of the ball. Now, how about Oregon? What was your thoughts? Obviously, they had one of the short season made their season even a little more interesting. They were the Pac-12 champions, but they also lost 3 games, including 2 to not very good teams. What was your thoughts of Oregon this year?
Yeah, Oregon, it kind of felt like a youth movement. I think when they lost those players to the opt-outs, I think that really hurt the defense. The secondary, if they had those guys, it would have been, maybe them or UW would have been the best secondary in the conference. So that alone, I think, has really made it tough for them. And from a defensive perspective, the offense was actually pretty good this year. But then it seemed like Chuck kind of just regressed, I would say. And I actually, by the end of the year, I was kind of thinking that Anthony Brown actually looked like the better option at quarterback. But Ty Thompson next year might be the guy. So, that to me, the biggest question mark on Oregon next season really is the quarterback position. And but I think that Moorhead is such a good OC. In my opinion, he's the best OC in the conference. I think that he can, no matter what, get Oregon to score some points. Doesn't really matter who the quarterback is. So that's, a big advantage they have over the Huskies there. So I think that, Oregon, from a pure talent perspective, I think I really like their roster probably better than anyone in the Pac-12 next year. And I think even this year you could really just see, like Noah Sewell, guy's just a monster. So they have a lot of really talented pieces. And, CJ Verdell's coming back, and I really like him. Travis Dye is really good as well. So, and then the receivers, I mean, they kind of bring everyone back there as well. So I think that, they showed flashes of being a great team, but there's also just some really disappointing games at times, like the Iowa State game. I actually, to be honest, thought Oregon was, maybe I wasn't a believer in Iowa State in the Big 12, but I actually thought Oregon was going to have a pretty good chance to win that game, and they kind of just dropped a dud. And, Oregon State game was disappointing. So I really just, Oregon was one of the harder teams to truly evaluate this season. Obviously young and talented, but the defense just didn't really show up the way it was expected, and the offensive drop off at the end of the year kind of hurt as well.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with pretty much a lot that you say. So just to touch on the one, they are actually, because I do a team talent formula. I do it every year for Sportscast. It's kind of similar to team talent composite, but it's a more simplistic formula. I don't use the Gashonian distribution theory. So it's just more of a basic math formula. But I take basically the highest graded guys, give a point value. And I believe I've done my rough draft, but I can't do the final one until like the second signing day. They've done all the final ratings for all the recruiting sites. But as of right now, Oregon's going to be like number 7th rated roster, number 8 in the whole country. And they are going to be they are going to be number 1 in the Pac-12. So you are right about the baseline. And then it's going to be the only 3 teams in the top 20 will be Oregon, USC, and Washington. But to touch back on your point, defensively, I to be honest with you, there was not a more disappointing unit in the Pac-12 than the Oregon defense. And I know they lost their opt-outs in Jevon Holland, Thomas Graham, and Brady Breeze. But they still returned a lot in the front 7. Kayvon Thibodeau, Jordan Scott, Austin Falio, Isaac Slade-Matasea, and they had Mesafuna. They still had enough that came back that their performance this year was a little baffling. And you could boil down to the COVID, the wonky year, maybe mentally not being there. But it was some games, it was just the lack of physicality at the line of scrimmage. I could think of the Oregon State game in particular, where Oregon State was just running the ball down their throat. UCLA was another game where they were just getting driven back, and you saw defensive linemen getting moved off the line of scrimmage. And basically, the first guy that was touching running back was a defensive back, which anyone that knows football, that's not ideal. And then the safety position, that had a little bit to do with the opt-outs, just really struggling covering the ball down the field. They were kind of like a lot of teams were able to exploit the middle of the defense and to get a lot of effective passes down the field. And those overall drive efficiencies, not getting off the field, taking 15-play drives. You saw that in the Iowa State game. I think the first 3 drives, it felt like Iowa State was on the field for – the only team on the field. It was like 8 minutes, 15-play drives. Another 8 minutes, 15-play drives. They had like 40 plays to Oregon's 10 by the time the second quarter was around. So just the drive efficiency on defense, overall lack of physicality at the line of scrimmage, and then the problem covering the middle of the field was honestly a very disappointing year defensively for them. That's why when Andy Avalos actually got the job at Boise State, I was like, I just wasn't that sad, because even though they had the opt-outs they did, I didn't understand the defensive, just the kind of marginal defensive play. I just thought it was a little over much for the talent that they're going against. I mean, Oregon State, which has such a inferior roster as far as just as Jimmy and Joe guys go, that they should not be having 500 yards total offense on you. They should not be running for 250 plus yards. I just thought that was it was just a pretty bad defensive performances by Oregon. And offensively, I agree with you on pretty much everything that you said. I thought the offense at times looked really good. They definitely were able to have explosive plays. They were able to run the ball effectively at times. The only problem was Tyler Shuck. Even early in the season, there was some mistakes that he made that's like, he just doesn't seem to be seeing things. But then when he started, I think, getting in his head, he started overthinking. He lost confidence. By the end of the season, he really wasn't playing well at all. And then Anthony Brown came in and was able to kind of give a little bit of a kick in the butt. So he's coming back, Brown. Shuck's going to come back. They're probably going to battle it out, maybe declare a winner in spring ball. Probably the other one transfers. Seems like college football the way it goes. And then Ty Thompson's a dark horse. He's one of the best quarterbacks. Kind of similar to Sam Hurd for Washington. Will Sam Hurd be the starting quarterback next year? Those are kind of positions to watch. But yeah, I thought the Oregon offense, and Oregon's returning I think all 11 starters on offense, and they signed, like I said, one of the best classes, especially on the offensive side of the ball in the whole country. So offensively, Oregon's looking pretty solid. I have more questions about the defense, but there is good players, like you said, Kayvon Thibodeau, Noah Sewell, Justin Flo will be back from injury. A guy like Mikael Wright was one of the better corners in the Pac-12. Jamal Hill was one of the better nickel guys. So there's some players there, but I do have, if there's a problem next year, and it really is the defensive side of the ball, especially in a game like Ohio State where you're going to play just elite skill guys on the outside. So, I mean, I don't know what else. What others? What other storylines to cover in the Pac-12? So obviously, when it came to what did you think about the new coaching hires for like Arizona, hiring Jed Fish? What was your thoughts on that? That was pretty much the only movement, I believe, coaching-wise in the Pac-12.
Yeah, with so Fish, I don't think that it was like a name that necessarily inspired like a ton of excitement around the conference from its initial announcement. But Fish did do a good job with the UCLA offense in like 2017. So he's definitely a bright offensive mind, but I actually have been really impressed with what he's built there. His assistant hires were really, really, really good. Don Brown had one bad year at Michigan, but before that, I mean, he's had a great track record. So to be able to get someone like that at, Arizona is pretty crazy. We're going to be putting out our defensive coordinator rankings in the next couple of weeks once it's finalized. And I mean, at this point, it's him or Scally's number one with Kwiatkowski gone. So it's for them to get someone like that is just pretty wild. And then, so he's an offensive mind. So now you have, an offensive guy who can put up some points teamed up with a good defensive mind. I mean, they have a pretty bad roster, but he's kind of filling that in with transfers at the moment. So, I mean, from what he's done, I would give him like an A+ at this point for what you can generally accomplish at Arizona. It's definitely impressive. And I think that people really should start paying attention to what he's kind of doing down there. Cause I mean, there's a chance that, it's not going to be good next year, but give it 2, 3, 4 years, they might become, a team that can win some games and start winning like 6 to 8, 9 games. I don't know. So they'll have a chance to do something. But back to what you were saying about Andy Avalos, I actually wasn't as high on him as a lot of people were too. I don't think that his defenses at Boise State were really all that great. I think that if you watched what, Justin Wilcox and Pete Kwiatkowski did at Boise State, it was definitely a lot more impressive than what Andy Avalos did, because Avalos actually had a lot of duds. When he was playing the P5 teams at Boise State, they were giving up like 40 points pretty consistently. So I think 2019 in Oregon was a little bit of an outlier, honestly, in his career. And he kind of regressed back to what he truly is, this past year. And Boise State, you're really more like the USC of your conference, where you have a huge talent advantage. So for him giving up a lot of those big point games there, it's really not a great look. And I actually think that their new DC hire is going to be better from scheme perspective than what they had with Avalos.
Tim DeRuyter.
Yep.
Yep, I agree. I think he's pretty good. He's a pretty good DC. I agree. I think that was an upgrade for Oregon. When you think of sexy hires, you think of a young hotshot that can get all the big blue chippers. But I think a guy that's had a track record of, successful DC at, Air Force, and then Texas A&M, and then Cal, and he's also even been a head coach. So yeah, I think that was a upgrade. I think that was good. I think that was a very good hire by Mario. I'm glad he went that route. There was a lot of rumblings that a guy like Tosh Sepoy was going to come there, or maybe a Chris Ash, but I was definitely Zach Arnett was another name you heard, but I was kind of happy that he went with like an older, more experienced guy, because I was on here like 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. It was when Auburn lost. They fired Gus Malzahn, and Mario was one of the names trending. And my argument was I actually didn't think they should hire Mario Cristobal, because I think Mario, he's a great recruiter. He's one of the better recruiters. I mean, clearly in the Pac-12, he's the best, I would say. It's hard to argue against that. But I mean, nationally, I mean, his ability to bring in like high-rated guys to Oregon they've never recruited at this level. But when it comes to actually game management, in-game adjustments, being able to basically his in-game coaching, I've always thought has been pretty to the point where at times he does things that are baffling. So I'd say less than average, like below average. So he needs good coordinators. I like him in a position as the kind of being a CEO, being the face of the program, being the culture guy, being the recruiting guru that he is, but not really being one that has to tinker with the offense, tinker with the defense a ton, because I don't see, he's not a Lincoln Riley. He's not a Ryan Day. He's not even Nick Saban, who was a great defensive mind. So he's more of like a Dabo or someone along that lines that he can recruit, he can be the culture guy, but I think he really needed those strong coordinators. And like you said, like Avalos, there was a couple of games there that I'm like, if this is not working, if you're seeing that this team is having the ability to do this, you have to change it up. You can't just keep on running the same kind of defense because obviously your guys are matching up. It's not working. Just because you have the higher rated recruits, just because you have what on paper looks like the better guys, they're not winning tonight. So you have to get creative. You have to bring pressure. You have to spark life into a defense that maybe seems to be lacking it. And that was the portion that I didn't see from Avalos. And the fact that he brings a DeRuiter, I could see DeRuiter, who at times has had to coach defenses that didn't have the personnel. He had to find ways to create explosive plays, turnovers, and the ability to stop guys that might have had better personnel on the other side of the ball, but he was able to manage against that, exploit against that advantage by being just a terrific play caller and a terrific defensive mind. So, yeah, I agree with you. I like the hire. I was going to ask about someone else. Well, Washington, who is Washington? Do you have any idea who is in the running right now for the defensive coordinator? Is it pretty undercover, or is there much intel linking?
Yeah, it's from what I've heard, they have some interest in Cord Dennison. He is a former Husky linebacker and currently co-DC with Louisville.
Okay.
So I've actually been talking with some people who cover Louisville, and I've heard that he's a candidate, but I don't know if that's the route they're going to go or not. There's a good chance that they could just promote the co-DC Malloy into being that play caller, because like you said before, it's Jimmy Lake's defense, and he's not going to hire someone that he wants someone in that position that he kind of be underneath him, like more so doing what he wants to do, which really makes me think they're going to stick in that kind of Boise tree. And Dennison wouldn't really be that guy, but Dennison has had some time with Peter Sermon, who's had time with Wilcox, and Wilcox into that Boise tree. So Dennison does have some exposure to that, and he's a good recruiter, and he would be able to listen kind of just to Jimmy Lake and just kind of do what Jimmy Lake's saying and be kind of like mentored in that role. He's young too, so be more willing to do that. So I definitely would kind of expect someone who can, and they're going to bring someone in who can recruit as well, because, recruiting's not going that well for the Huskies at the moment. So definitely kind of looking at that, recruiting type of aspect. But, overall, there hasn't been too many leaks from that front. I know Husky fans really want to see Gerald Alexander come back and be that guy for the Huskies. He was a really good defensive back coach at Cal and an assistant at UW back in like 2014, 2015. But indications I've heard is that he's not interested in coming back to the college game and wants to stay in the NFL. So, it feels like right now that Dennison's the only real name I'm hearing outside of the Husky internal hires is getting some traction, but it'll be interesting to follow and kind of see where they end up going. Yeah,
it's funny, Alexander, that's too, because Oregon, Keith Hayward, and that's another guy. Would Keith Hayward be interested? Would he be a candidate, or is he just a candidate over at Cal for the co-DC?
It sounds like he pretty much has taken that Cal DC job. I think it's pretty much locked up. So
he's gone from Oregon.
And actually, apparently Hayward and Lake aren't huge fans of each other because of their time recruiting against each other at Oregon and UW. They're both DB coaches and the same players. So I think they like that negative recruiting that goes on. So they're not huge fans of each other.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, in Washington, Oregon, that's always, you don't see a whole lot of those guys switching around. Court Dennison, because I know Court was a pretty good linebacker for Washington. He was a linebacker coach for Oregon for a season.
That's true, actually. Yeah, he did a good job there. So he
recruited really well. He helped with Thibodeau right before, and he ended up leaving right before. Yeah. So, and is there any other hires of note going on in the Pac-12 right now? Is there any other positions that are available that you know of? Because I can't think of any offhand.
Colorado still needs to make their DC hire, but that one is like completely under wraps. Like I have asked around and I haven't heard a single thing. No one knows, or they're all keeping it pretty locked down on that front. Another name for the UW-DC position, Peter Sermon, I think, is a possibility for the Huskies. And that, I think that also increases the odds that Keith Hayward can actually get the play calling option at Cal if Sermon is to go to UW. And Sermon's son actually plays at UW right now, so definitely worth watching that name too. But no, so Colorado's DC job is open. Trying to think of anything else, but that seems like that's about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think offhand. Yeah, I don't believe there's any other jobs that are open. I'm trying to think of who else we haven't chatted about. Well, we haven't really chatted about UCLA. What was your thought? And actually, Stanford. Let's go UCLA first. What was your thoughts about UCLA season? I was actually low key a little bit impressed. Reason why I mean low key, they finished 3-4 and they lost a lot of games at the end that they probably actually could have won. They should have won. Could have beaten Oregon. Should have beaten USC. They could have beaten Stanford, but they ended up losing all those games. Could even come back and beat Colorado. They really were in every game, and then every game that they won, they actually won pretty easily. They ran the ball. Demetric Felton was phenomenal this season. DTR at times did some really good things. Their defense got off to the quarterback good. There were some good things. At least UCLA did not look like a bad team this year. What was your overall thoughts about them, and what do you think about them going into next season?
Chip Kelly's tenure at UCLA has really confused me in the sense that, his first 2 years there, he ran an offense that was kind of like his weird NFL offense that he ran, where it was like that kind of just an awkward mix of kind of what he did to Oregon, but also a little pro style. And then this year, it seemed like he went back to his roots a little bit, more like the Oregon offense, and was letting the quarterbacks run, really got that zone read going. And it looked way better, and they actually had one of the best offenses in the Pac-12 this season. And so I think they're going to be set on offense next year. But I think the defense is going to continue to be a liability, and I think that the hire Chip Kelly made at DC with Jerry Azzinaro is just, I don't think he really had a track record that deserved that job, and I think that's going to be kind of their downfall. And so if he doesn't win, I have to feel like 7 wins next year is probably the baseline. 6 wins, he's probably out. So he really needs to figure it out and kind of, but they should be solid enough next year. They have some talented pieces, between DTR and Chase Griffin at quarterback. They got Britton Brown back at running back. He was pretty good this year. Kyle Phillips at receiver is pretty good. So, they'll be solid, and they have some talented defensive pieces too. Actually, I really liked Quantrez Knight. So they should be I think the South actually has some pretty good depth next year between USC, ASU, Utah, UCLA, and even Colorado. Those are all pretty solid teams. I think the North, it's going to be UW or Oregon, but the South, a little more open up, I think. Like UCLA really could surprise someone, but I don't know. I just don't really trust their defense.
Yeah. The more that you talk about it, because when I was kind of going over predictions of what I could see the South being next year. I'm like, oh, I could see Arizona State being 9-3 or 10-2. And I'm like, I could possibly see Utah. I could see UCLA being that. I was like, wow, the South is pretty good. USC could. I could also see USC having a surprisingly bad year too. So speaking of Stanford actually, like you kind of mentioned earlier, they didn't look bad. They won their last 4 games. The first game they lost, but they didn't have Davis Mills. Second game, he looked rusty, and then they won their last 4 games. But I don't think they're going to be very good next year. But I always say that, and then you never know. They might come out and win 8-9 games. But they have not recruited great. Their last 4 classes, they've had 2 classes that haven't even been in the top 40. And then I think they only have 1 top 20 class. They lost a lot of really good guys. Simi Fiocco, Foster Cerro, Drew Dahlman, Connor Wennington, just Gabe Reed on defense. So they just a lot of players they lost. I just having a hard time seeing how they're really replacing them with guys that are on the same level because they haven't recruited that good. They have some Austin Jones is a solid running back. I just don't know about the quarterbacks. I have not been impressed with I can't think of his name offhand. Not Tanner McGee, because McGee's probably the one that starts. Jack West.
Is it Jack West?
Yeah, Jack West. Michael Wilson, is he back?
What was the name?
Michael Wilson, the wide receiver.
I think he should be back, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's back.
Hoker's gone.
Fioco's gone. Elijah Higgins is back, and he's a young, talented, pretty good receiver. But overall, Thomas Booker's back on defense. He's a solid player. But overall, I just don't. I'm just not loving that roster. I mean, David Shaw's a good coach, but yet there is a time where you just have to recruit at a little better level. What's your thoughts on Stanford going into next season?
Stanford's had a really weird kind of slow demise under David Shaw. It feels like, usually you get like that quick drop off, even like Oregon under Helfrich, where like, you just kind of plummet all of a sudden. And then Stanford hasn't really had that. They kind of just, keep slowly getting worse from where they were at the Harbaugh era. Recruiting keeps getting a little bit worse. So they're not going to be able to replace those talented players they had with, people who are as good. And they'll still be one of the best teams from a talent perspective in the Pac-12 even next year. Probably, from straight talent, probably 4th best in the Pac-12 next year. But I think, they, like you said, they keep losing players. So they'll be solid enough, but I can't see them winning Pac-12 next year. I think that maybe 7 games or maybe 8 games they can win, but I would probably put it at like 7 wins.
Yeah, actually wouldn't be a bad season. So since we're in that area of California, what's your thoughts of Cal next season?
Well, Cal, I thought they were going to be really good this year. So I was pretty shocked at, what they became this year. And it's kind of strange that they returned, almost every player from an 8-win team and then just didn't look very good. So I do think they showed a little bit of improvement at the end of the year. They did win that game against Oregon. They're returning a lot again next year, but the performance this year kind of put a damper on it for them in terms of where they can go. Their offensive line, I thought, was going to be a lot better this year because they returned everyone from last year's team, but then they just were awful again. So, maybe those guys just weren't enough that good, and there wasn't going to be improved. And that's kind of maybe I'm thinking about their entire roster. They don't recruit at a great level, so I don't know if they really have the talent to keep up with the UW or Oregon. I see them being a pretty solid team next year. I think they're going to be probably better than Oregon State and Wazoo, but maybe a little worse than Stanford or maybe equal to Stanford. It's kind of the way I have them.
Yeah, I think Cal is one of those teams that I think is one of the hardest, maybe actually, if I was going to say the very hardest team to really analyze their performance this year and actually to come with a really strong conclusion based upon any significant evidence. I think they're perhaps the hardest team in the Pac-12 because the first game of the season, remember they had that the one person had COVID, they had to cancel a game, and they couldn't practice together. And like the defensive line had to practice on a field by themselves. And then they last second had scheduled a game with UCLA, and they didn't even get any practice time with like offense and defense as a full team. They just had a really difficult situation. Stanford, to a certain extent, too, just that part of California was a lot stricter with their shutdowns. It's hard to say what Cal was. I mean, they looked pretty good against Oregon. No, Oregon didn't play very good, but they won. And, a couple of the other games were competitive. But, yeah, it was just hard to come away. From my perspective, I don't know. I can't say what I think Cal's going to be. You're correct about what you said, that they don't recruit that well. They're not a very talented roster. So there's always that problem. I think Wilcox is a good coach. Obviously lost to Reuter. He might lose Sermon, so that could be problematic. Hayward, I don't think, is as good as those guys, so that would be a step down. But then Wilcox is a defensive coach. But how's their offense looking? It's always kind of a question mark, and we didn't see a lot from it this year. So, yeah, it's one of those that they're a team. I don't know. 6-6. It's just, I think they'll win 6 games. I think he's a good enough coach too. They could be worse. I doubt they'd be much better. And so that probably segue the last 2 teams we're just going through. Washington State, Oregon State. Obviously, you saw more from Oregon State than Washington State. Did you take anything good, enough evidence from either team that you like seeing forwards, or stuff that you maybe can see concerning?
For Oregon State, what I've really liked is that Jonathan Smith has done a good job at picking up talented transfers. And I think that's the route you have to go to Oregon State. You're not going to win, against Oregon in recruiting battles or against UW for those four-star kids. But, they can get them once those kids want to transfer. And, so that's kind of become this, they're kind of doing that and gotten some really good players that way. I think they need to figure out the quarterback position still. I don't think that Gebbia necessarily is the answer. Losing Jamar Jefferson to the NFL is going to be tough because I think he really carried that entire offense this year. It was kind of a one-man show, and he just was an absolute beast. And, so without him, I think Jonathan Smith has done actually a really good job there, but the lack of talent, again, it's going to put them in that range where they're going to win like 4, 5, 6 games, and they don't seem like a real threat to me to actually win the conference. Wazoo's kind of the same way. I really liked what Jaden Delora showed. I think that he's really talented. I think Max Borghi's back next year, so that's a great weapon to have. Got some good receivers as well with Travell Harris and Renard Bell. So offense should be pretty good, but defense, may not be up to par. And I actually really like their DC hire when they got Jake Dickert from Wyoming. Mm-hmm. But, year one, it didn't look that good, and they'll probably make some strides this coming year. But again, Wazoo, I think Leach did a really good job, winning games without much talent. And, I don't know if Rolovich can really replicate what Leach did in terms of winning like 8-9 games every year. I think, Rolovich probably win more like 4 to 7 games every year. So, I think that Cal definitely has way more of a chance to be that dark horse, and Cal could win the Pac-12 North. I really don't think Wazoo or Oregon State really have a chance.
Yeah, man, I'd be shocked if Cal did. But yeah, you never know. Yeah, when I think of the conferences, I think there'd have to be some stuff that goes wrong with Washington and Oregon. I do think if I were to, so I can ask you this question next. Prediction next year, I would go with Oregon. I just think they have the best roster. And at the end of the day, I think that they have the best. They're going to have the best offense, and how college football is going. If you can have guys that can make those big plays, you have explosive offense, explosive quarterbacks, explosive receivers that can get down the field, and just test the team that way. And it just sets up so much other things on the offensive side of the ball. I just like them best because of that. Now, there's concerns. I didn't like the defensive performance this year, especially with the talent. Now, next year, let's see if the new hire of DeRuiter can kind of change that. If it does, I think Oregon is I don't know if they run the table in the Pac-12. I probably would say no. I also wouldn't pick them to go into Ohio State and upset Ohio State just because Ohio State's so good. but I would probably pick Oregon to be like a 10-2 sort of season and win the North. And I think Washington's probably a 9-3 off the top of my head. It's hard between those last four. I don't think any of them are really that good. I guess I'd give Stanford the advantage with a 7-5, Cal 6-6, maybe a 5-7 for Washington State, and like a 3-9 for Oregon State. On the South, I would probably lean right now Arizona State. Experience at the quarterback position, they bring back a lot. I liked what I saw, even though it was just 4 games. I thought they should have won the USC game. The USC-LA game was tough because it was coming after that huge COVID stoppage. And then they looked pretty good against a terrible Arizona, but still look good. And then Oregon State. So I thought they looked pretty good. I think I'd take them. I think second, maybe Utah, especially if they can get the quarterback position right. And I think Charlie Brewer or Jadarius Jackson could both be an upgrade from what Jake Bentley was able to give this season. And then I think USC is going to be disappointed. I think they actually might finish 4th at like 6-6. And then I just say Colorado and Arizona. I just don't think they have enough talent in those rosters. I think those are like 2-10, 4-8 teams. I know Colorado was better than that this year, but I think they kind of got lucky due to the wonky COVID season. What would be your early predictions in the Pac-12?
I actually have pretty much on the same thought train as you are. I think you'd kind of agree on a lot of these, kind of predictions, and I think we see things the same way. So I think I have Oregon right now, especially with UW losing their defensive coordinator, and really kind of just the disruption potentially with Puka Nacua transferring, as we mentioned before. I give Oregon the slight edge right now, number 1 in the Pac-12 North. I think they lose to Ohio State, probably maybe drop 1 Pac-12 game. So I think 10-2 is pretty realistic. I think UW, wins 8 or 9 games. Stanford, around 7. I think Cal around 6 or 7. And then Wazoo maybe 5 games, and then Oregon State maybe 4 or 5. And then over to the South, I've been going back and forth between Utah, Arizona State, and USC because, USC has a better roster top to bottom than those two, but USC just seems to always fall flat in some way, right? Mm-hmm. So, I actually think I'm leaning towards Arizona State too at this point. Arizona State has the quarterback play that's proven with Jaden Daniels. Their running backs looked amazing. So, end of the year, they looked like maybe even the best team in the Pac-12, and they were, it was just Arizona, I guess, but that game was pretty nuts, and they really destroyed them. So I think I'll take them in the South, and then number 2, take USC. Number 3, Utah. 4, I think USC and Utah both win around 9 games, and then I think 4, I think UCLA wins 5 or 6 games, and then Colorado maybe wins 5 or 6, and then Arizona, who knows, 2 games, maybe 3 games. So I think you and I both see it really, really similar.
Yeah, almost I think it's identical. So I guess you're a little higher. I guess I'm kind of feeling USC losing a couple games early, and they kind of lose. I just think the culture might get affected, and I think that might be the swan song for Clay Helton. But you think he might be able to get his troops hang on enough that they end up having a 9-3 season?
Yeah, I think he wins 8 or 9 games. That's kind of feels like that's kind of the MO. And they have Keaton Slovis, who's obviously a really good quarterback. And in college football, having a good QB is, maybe half the battle already. Yeah. So, but I think that game against Notre Dame could really define what happens with Clay Helton. If they go to South Bend and just get destroyed, I think Helton needs to win maybe 10 games next year. I think their fans are pretty upset with him. So, 9 games I don't think is going to be enough for him to keep his job unless it's a really good 9 wins, beating Notre Dame and stuff like that. But, I think their fans are probably going to want to see 10-2 before they want to keep him. So, and I think that they have to go on the road to play Arizona State. So that gives, ASU the leg up there. I think that they just barely kind of fall short. I think them and Utah will be about pretty similar. And, I think that them, Utah, and ASU, I guess, are all pretty similar, but I'll give ASU the edge just because USC actually has to go to Tempe and play there, so that gives Arizona State the win, in my opinion.
So last question I would ask, if you had to name 5 players on offense and 5 players on defense that you would consider the kind of premier players coming back next year in the Pac-12, who would they be?
Ooh, that's a fun question. Let's see if I can narrow it down to just 5 here. Let me think a few, top guys.
10.
So
That's fine. You can do 10. 5's a little narrow. You can do top 10 offense and 10 defense.
So, I think that starting with, I guess I'll start from the north and kind of work my way down. So, Wazoo, I really like Javale Harris. I really like Renard Bell. And then Max Borghi, I think, is a stud as well. Out of that trio, I guess I'll take Max Borghi over the other 2. I think he really has an NFL game for what running backs do in the NFL right now. Over at Washington, I would actually more focus on the offensive line with Jackson Kirkland. I think he's a stud. Puka Nacua, if he is to play and actually be healthy, he is an outstanding talent, I think, and someone that can really dominate a game. And I think, whenever he has played, he's had huge performances, but he just can't stay healthy. Moving down to Oregon, I really like. The Ducks actually have just talent all over on offense. I think that you can always guarantee the O-line is going to be good under Mario Cristobal. And then I think CJ Verdell, who was a little disappointing this year, but I really like his game. He's tough, but also breaks some big, fast runs. Once he gets open field, he's actually surprisingly quick. Travis Dye looks tiny on a football field, but he was really good this year, and he's actually looked better than CJ Verdell. And then Jalen Redd is a really talented receiver, so I like what he does. Micah Pittman. Then moving down to Cal, I think, is Kakoa Crawford going pro this year? I think he may have left. So, they have
Cal's going to be hard.
Yeah, and Cal doesn't really have a whole lot of offensive weapons, and I didn't really like their offensive coordinator hire either. So, that's one that I don't really think. Chris Brown's good, I guess, running back. That might be their best piece. And then Stanford, I think that we mentioned Austin Jones. He could maybe do some stuff. Michael Wilson. And USC, I think Drake London, it looks like maybe, this season he showed flashes of being like the top receiver in the conference, and next year he may be that guy. So I would definitely look at him. Keaton Slovis is an obvious one. And at UCLA, I think that Kyle Phillips, he's more of like a possession receiver kind of guy, but he really shows some good stuff. Arizona State, I think that Tranum, that freshman running back, was really talented. So I liked him, and Jaden Daniels. Arizona Wildcats is a tough one. I don't really know if they have much weapons that I really would be impressed by, so I'll just skip them entirely. And then, with Utah, I think that's Charlie Brewer. I really like what he did at Baylor. I think he's got some talent. So, and I'm actually really excited to see what they do with the transfers too, with TJ Pledger, running back from Oklahoma. And then Colorado, I think Jarek Broussard is going to be one of the best players in the conference. So, breaking it down to 5 from there, I really like Jarek Broussard. I really like Drake London. I think Max Borghi is going to do something big. I think that CJ Verdell will actually have a big comeback year next year. And then, I think that USC, honestly, just that receiver position, I think that someone's going to break out and then really do big stuff there too. And then talking defense, I think the Husky defense has a lot of really, really big names. And I think that, between Ryan Bowman, Ucla, Trent McDuffie, those 3 guys are going to be really, really dominant next year. Oregon with Noah Sewell and Mikael Wright, I think those are, going to be 2 of the best players. Justin Flo will probably be a dominant player next year. And then Oregon State's got Avery Roberts, who's pretty good. And let's see who else. Like USC, like I talked about before, the USC lost a lot of guys. So they're, maybe not going to be as good as they were. But Chase Lucas at Arizona State, I think, is really talented. So those are probably the guys I would call out on defense. Oh, Devin Lloyd from Utah as well. And that's probably the top 5 right there.
Oh, okay. Now you might be forget Drake Jackson, Kayvon Thibodeau, and ZTF.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I went through too many offense guys.
I thought that you yeah, I would say, actually, there you go. I would say ZTF, Kayvon Thibodeau, Drake Jackson, Devin Lloyd, and Trent McDuffie's a really good player. So I'd probably go with him as number 5. Offensively, the quarterbacks, someone would say Keaton Solvish or Jane Daniels, but I don't know if any of the quarterbacks have garnered. They're good players, but I don't see any real game changer yet in the Pac-12. Perhaps a Sam Heward or a Ty Thompson or a Jackson Dart in the future can be that kind of guy in the Pac-12, and I hope so. It's a quarterback-driven game right now, football is. I would probably say Drake London. He's a great player. Jarek Broussard had obviously a very, very good year. Let's see if he can do it again in Colorado. I have my doubts about Colorado. The last 2 games of the season, I think, showed a lot more what Colorado was as a team. I actually really like Devin Williams for Oregon. He was a USC transfer. When he played, he was out a couple games with the COVID protocol. He was pretty darn explosive, and he added a different variation. I could see Devin Williams being one of the better players in the conference next year. I like Cade Otton. Cade Otton is probably the best tight end, and it's hard to say a tight end ever being one of the 5 best players, but I just think he's a very, very good player. And then I'd probably I like the tight end for UCLA, Dulcich. There's another tight end.
That's a call out.
Yeah, I mean that could stud. And he had a terrific game. I remember that game against USC. They could not guard him. Did you say he left?
No, that's a good call out. Yeah, I think that.
Okay.
I actually put him on our website, BFB first team All Pac-12. So he's a monster, and and like you said about Oregon, I think that Oregon's got a ton of really good young pieces with Thibodeau, Sewell, Funa, Flo, Slade, Mata Utia. So I mean, they're going to be really talented. Mikhail Wright. Jamal Hill even looked really good at times. So Oregon's defense is pretty stacked.
Yeah, Jamal Hill would be one of those dark horse guys that, how he looked at the end of the year, if he ended up coming out and being like an All-American level player, I would not be totally shocked. He's a pretty good player. When you go through, you do see Drake Jackson. You have to mention, especially like defensively, Drake Jackson. And there's still, like USC does, like Drake Jackson, Chris Steele, Will Xavier Alford or one of those transfers that they have come in. They also got Katie Nixon, USC, and Gary Bryant Jr. and how about Brew McCoy, a former 5-star. So USC still does have the people. They've had people you look at the team talent composite, USC has consistently had one of the best rosters in college football, but Clay Helton, team talent composite inception was 6 years ago. In those 6 years, Clay Helton's only won 1 Pac-12 title. He's only had 1 top 10 finish. So it just called me a skeptic of a guy that has not utilized his talent to the best of his ability, and has a younger roster and probably on paper even a little less talented than some of his other teams. Will he be able to galvanize that and be able to manage it to a successful team? I have my doubts. I really do. I don't mind Tyler Lando. I don't love Tyler Lando. I don't love Graham Harreld's not a bad. I think his system would work for certain teams. I don't like that system for USC. USC, they should be able to run the ball. I mean, the way that their inability to run the ball the last couple seasons is baffling. I mean, USC has always been known for having terrific running backs. I mean, Lindale White, Reggie Bush. I grew up on USC having some of the best running backs in college football. Now they can't even run the ball. So I just don't like that hire there. I just don't like how USC looks. I'll never be a USC fan, but a good USC is been a part of like the core of the Pac-12, right? I mean, when USC is good, you feel like the Pac-12 is doing good, right? And they're one of the real blue bloods in college football that have been good for half a century. So I don't know. I just don't. I'm just not a believer in that system. I'm not a believer in that coach. I'm not a believer in this culture. And I think the quicker they get rid of Clay Helton, the better for them, because they can probably find someone to do at least a little better job. And that's just my opinion there. But, well, Ken, I think we covered a lot. I think we did it. Me and you agreed on quite a bit, honestly. It sounded like we kind of saw the season in a similar fashion. I think we kind of see next season in a similar fashion. I'm really interested because I think we get, like you said, and like I've said, I think the sample size due to just all, the late start and all the cancellations, the teams playing only 4 games. I just thought it was so minimal. It felt like an exhibition season. Big Ten was kind of similar. I covered the Big Ten actually on this podcast too. And I feel much the same. I don't think people in the Big Ten, they're like, man, Michigan was terrible in Penn State. But I'm like, hey, it was so weird. I wouldn't consider that to be the consistent future. It's more of an anomaly. So I think next year you'll see how good teams are, and the full off season of everyone getting kind of back to normal, I think will do a lot of good. And I want to see I would love nothing more to see a Pac-12 team back in a college football play. Do you think there's any possibility next year that the Pac-12 can get back to the college football playoff?
Actually, I think the biggest issue with that is that the Pac-12 next year just has too much parity. I think that, when we went through those players, and there's just so many talented players in that you usually don't have that many star players returning, around the conference. But with this new rule that, players can come back, it really creates that parity. And, I think that the teams that lost players are more so like UW, Oregon, USC, Stanford. The teams that recruit really well are the ones that lost some guys to the NFL, before the season and after the season. And then the schools like Wazoo, didn't really lose anyone at all. So it's going to even kind of, like those schools should be able to compete even better with, the UW, Oregon, USCs of the world. And so, we're talking about there's going to be a lot of parity next year. And I think the parity in the Pac-12 is honestly one of its biggest detriments. I just can't really see a Pac-12 team only losing 1 game total, especially since, Oregon has to play Ohio State, UW has to play, Michigan. I think both are going on the road to do those games too. So that makes it even harder. USC has to go to Notre Dame. If one of those schools can pull those wins off though, and then run the table, or only lose 1 game in conference play, then I think that they have a really good chance of making the playoff. But, as it stands, it's frustrating. And I think that we're going to kind of come up short again. I think we'll end up with like a 2-loss, champion situation. So, fingers crossed that someone makes it. But at the moment, I think, it's going to be another year without making the playoff.
Yeah. I would, as of today, I would tend to agree. Obviously, if the roster that's going to be the best is going to be Oregon, and they're the one that has the best game in the non-conference. If they're able to pull off the upset there, then that would probably be your best chance. I'm just not seeing. I think. Yeah, but I'm not going to predict it, but that'd probably be your best chance at making the playoff. But it's as of today, it definitely would be more of a surprise if it were to happen. Hi, Kent. Well, thanks for coming on, man. You're welcome back anytime. We'll probably have you out again during this off season. Maybe we can talk. I don't know. We'll talk something. I'll probably send you guys over my team talent formula when I get it done. I do a top 25. I actually do all of college football, so I might do this year. I might go through specifically and do just the Pac-12. So I'll send you guys over, and maybe you can share it or something on your page. So thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it, and it's always good to talk some good football, and you have a wonderful night.
Yeah, thank you. And you definitely send that over, and we would love to share it, with our followers. So I love looking at stuff like that, and definitely gives you some insight into, how things should shake up the next season. But great talking to you, and I'm sure we'll connect again soon.
I can. Have a good day, man.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye. All right, guys, go check out the Sportscast on sportscast.net. Check us out on Twitter, iTunes, leave a review. Great talking college football. Today was a little Pac-12 coverage. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.